At 11:38 p.m., the marble behind the Aurora Crescent's front desk still held the day's warmth, while the glass revolving doors sighed cold rain into the lobby every few minutes. And Sienna Diaz stood in the middle of that polished wealth with a smile pinned so precisely that most guests mistook exhaustion for professionalism. The crystal chandelier above her scattered fractured light across black stone floors, over suitcases that cost more than her monthly rent, over men in tailored charcoal and women with diamond bracelets loose on their wrists, and then over Sienna's mended cuff, where the thread never quite matched the original fabric. She had been on her feet for 13 hours and 21 minutes when she checked the desk clock. She had $40.62 in tips folded beneath the keyboard. She had 2 overdue notices in her tote bag and 1 dialysis invoice stamped "Final Reminder." The Aurora Crescent prided itself on discretion, which meant guests never had to see strain. They asked for impossible upgrades at midnight, private cars during thunder, vegan tasting menus at 2 a.m., and they got yes delivered in a calm voice before they finished the request. Sienna had learned the rhythm by heart. Confirm, reassure, root, document, smile. Her manager called it service choreography. She called it survival with better lighting. Between check-ins, she opened the desk drawer and straightened the 3 envelopes she had already read that morning in her kitchen. Rent pass due by 9 days, utility warning, nephrology billing. Each time she touched the paper, her throat tightened in the same place, a narrow pressure under her collarbone that made breathing feel calculated. "Diaz," the night auditor murmured from the side terminal, not looking up. "You good for another walk-in wave?" She nodded once. "I'm good." He gave her a side glance, the kind co-workers gave when they noticed the shaking before guests did. "You ate? Later?" He made a quiet sound that might have been disagreement, then returned to his ledger, with the solemn focus of a man who knew exactly what late fees looked like in every neighborhood south of Canal. No one at the desk asked direct questions anymore. Sienna had made politeness into armor, and armor did what it was built to do. It held shape while the person inside absorbed impact. At 12:07 a.m., she checked in a hedge fund couple arguing about a missing garment bag, a travel blogger filming the lobby without permission, and a surgeon from Chicago who tipped $20 because she found his reservation while he dictated a note into his phone. She thanked him, slid the bill into her pocket, and thought in automatic numbers. 58 now. If she skipped groceries tomorrow and paid only the minimum on the electric account, she could cover half the transport add-on. And the clinic started charging for Saturday dialysis overflow. Nico hated that transport fee. He hated all reminders that his body required scheduling and receipts and signatures. Sienna hated how quickly she could translate his life into line items when panic rose. Her phone vibrated against her hip at 12:31. Menai 0 popped across the screen with the photo he refused to update, hair longer, grin crooked. She couldn't answer at the desk with a guest approaching, so she sent the fastest text she could while printing key cards. "On shift. You okay?" The typing bubble appeared, vanished, returned. "Yeah, just tired. Don't forget your own meds this time." The guilt landed sharper than the rain against the windows. She had forgotten twice this month, both times after double shifts, both times because she had sorted his pill organizer first and collapsed before opening her own bottle. She typed a heart, then deleted it and sent a thumbs up because sentiment cost time she didn't have. 3 seconds later, his reply came back. "You don't have to do all this alone." She locked the screen before she could answer. She had built their life on one principle: keep moving, and no one saw where the seams were splitting. By 1:10 a.m., The lobby thinned to soft shoe leather. Low piano from hidden speakers, and the weather report scrolling across the concierge monitor. Flood advisory. Low visibility. Gust warning through dawn. Sienna rotated to brake, signed out with the clipped initials required by protocol, and carried her paper cup to the staff cafeteria on level B2. The room smelled like burnt coffee and lemon disinfectant. Fluorescent lights flattened everyone into pale uniforms and tired postures. She passed 6 open tables and chose the last one against a poured concrete wall, directly across from the only door. Her tray held a sandwich she wouldn't finish, and coffee gone lukewarm before she sat down. She set her back to the wall and scanned without seeming to scan. Door hinge. Camera dome in the corner with a blind edge near the vending machines. Fire pull station to the right. 20 feet. Security mirror reflection giving her a second angle on the corridor. A dishwasher rattled silverware into bins, and one spoon clicked hard against porcelain as her hand trembled around the cup. Not nerves, she told herself. Just fatigue. Just low blood sugar. Just 14-hour shifts stacking like unpaid interest. The lie tasted thin, even in her own head. Always that seat. Tasha from housekeeping dropped into the chair opposite her with a yogurt and 2 packets of crackers. You know there are better chairs, right? Sienna gave a small smile. This one has less draft. Tasha looked at the concrete behind her, then at the empty tables by the windows. Uh-huh. It's habit. From what? Sienna unwrapped half the sandwich and took a bite she barely registered. From liking to see people before they see me? Tasha held her gaze for 1 second longer than casual conversation required, then nodded like she had chosen not to push. Night manager wants volunteers for Saturday private event setup. Supposed to be huge money. Terrible guests. You doing it? Depends on shift coverage. Depends on rent, you mean. Sienna exhaled through her nose. That too? Tasha slid 1 cracker packet across the table. Take this before you faint in front of some billionaire and embarrass all of us. A short laugh escaped Sienna despite herself. Noted. It was the only light moment in the room, gone as fast as steam off bad coffee. At 1:42 a.m., she returned to the desk, with damp cuffs from a leaking break room sink and a dull ache running from her shoulder blades into her lower spine. The Aurora Crescent looked almost theatrical at that hour, polished brass and white orchids and discreet security earpieces that communicated power without naming it. Sienna had worked enough overnights to read hierarchy by posture. Junior staff moved in straight lines and spoke in apologetic half-steps. Executives turned corners like space belonged to them. Private security stood near columns, hands loose, eyes active. Guests saw luxury. Staff saw protocol. Sienna saw exits first. At 2:03, the house manager sent a group message requesting all overnight staff verify emergency contacts in the internal system before Monday. Sienna opened the form and stared at the legal name field she had already corrected 3 times during onboarding. Sienna Marisol Diaz remained intact across tax profile, payroll, and benefits. The old record had been sealed under a protective amendment she almost never thought about in daylight. But at night, with rain flattening itself against glass and the lobby thinning into shadows, old paperwork had a way of breathing. She clicked to save, then checked it again, then forced herself back to arrivals. A man in an expensive overcoat asked for a suite upgrade and called her sweetheart without meeting her eyes. She completed the request, printed the folio, and watched him leave behind a trail of wet footprints that housekeeping would wipe before anyone noticed. The hotel erased traces quickly. That was its promise to guests. Sienna sometimes wondered what it did to people who worked there too long. How much of yourself could be polished away before you mistook depletion for professionalism? At 2:27, another message lit her phone. This one from the clinic portal, not Nico. Payment overdue. Dialysis session balance. To avoid service interruption, remit by 5 p.m. Friday. Her vision narrowed for a moment, black edging the gold of the screen. She braced one hand on the counter until the dizziness passed. Service interruption wasn't a phrase. It was a threat dressed in administrative language. She opened her notes app and rewrote tomorrow in brutal order. Call billing office at 8:15. Pick up extra shift request form. Transfer tips. Cancel internet autopay. Sell the old camera. Ask landlord for 48 more hours. No, not ask. Negotiate. No. Offer partial in cash and look steady while doing it. The revolving door turned, bringing in a gust of rain and a couple laughing under one umbrella. Sienna straightened, tucked the phone away, and stepped into her role before the couple reached the desk. Her smile returned at exactly the right angle. Her voice stayed level. Keys, local recommendations, breakfast hours, elevator bank on the left. She performed calm so well that guests thanked her for making travel feel effortless. By 3:05 a.m., her break cup had gone fully cold at the edge of the workstation. She took one sip anyway and tasted paper, bitterness, and the metallic edge of adrenaline that never truly left her bloodstream. She signed off one reservation, answered 2 calls, routed a luggage request, and printed an itemized receipt for a guest who complained about minibar almonds. When she finally looked up, her reflection in the black marble panel beside the monitor startled her. Skin too pale under the lobby lights, dark circles deepened to bruised shadows, jaw locked from hours of holding herself composed. She touched the inside pocket of her blazer, where the folded bills sat with the overdue notices, all of it thin as tissue and heavy as stone. The rain kept coming, steady and unromantic against the glass, the kind that made the city feel like it had narrowed to wet pavement and bright windows you couldn't afford to enter. Sienna shifted her stance, angling slightly so she could see both the door and the elevator corridor at once, and kept working while the clock moved toward dawn. The next reservation alert barely faded from Sienna's screen when her desk line flashed amber. The code the house manager used when requests were orders with polished edges. She straightened before she picked up, one hand still resting on the marble as if the stone could lend her steadiness. Front desk, Diaz speaking. Level 4, Orchid Salon. Mrs. Halden said, every syllable clipped to protocol. The donor reception overran. Banquets is short 2 staff because one server left sick and one never clocked back in. You'll cover beverage rotation until we clear desserts. Sienna glanced at the arrivals queue, then at the clock. I'm assigned to lobby through 5. You're reassigned through my office. A pause, thinner than courtesy. Move now. And Diaz? Tonight's host committee notices everything. The line went dead before Sienna could answer. She logged the temporary post change, handed the terminal to the night auditor, and stepped from the front desk into the private corridor, where guest perfume gave way to stainless steel, lemon cleaner, and steam trapped in the walls. Her shoes made no sound on the service flooring. Her pulse did, loud in the base of her throat. Orchid Salon sat behind frosted glass and carved walnut, one floor above the lobby and one world away from the vending machines on B2. The room opened on chandeliers shaped like falling ice and table settings where each fork looked hand-measured. Men in tailored black moved like they were used to doors opening before they reached them. Women in silk leaned close over crystal stems and laughed without showing effort. Sienna felt the weight of her mended cuff the way she always did, when luxury sharpened the outline of what she could not afford. She slipped into service posture, tray balanced at her hip, voice lowered to the polished register guests expected from someone they did not expect to remember. "Still or sparkling, ma'am?" The woman she addressed wore enough stones at her throat to catch every light in the room, each movement scattering reflections across her shoulders like she carried her own spotlight. Her smile arrived a second late and contained no warmth. "Sparkling," she said, then looked directly at Sienna's nameplate. "Diaz, yes?" "Yes, ma'am." The woman accepted the glass, but did not drink. When one enters a room at this level, one adapts one's diction. "You sound like service staff in a room that costs more than your apartment." The conversation around them did not stop. It thinned, then angled toward the embarrassment with practiced discretion. One donor hid a smirk behind his napkin. Another turned her face away too quickly, pretending fascination with floral arrangements. Sienna kept her chin level because flinching invited more. "I apologize if my tone was not suitable," she said. "Would you prefer I route your request through your table captain?" The woman's diamonds moved when she laughed, a soft, bright ripple. "I prefer staff who understand where they are before they're corrected." Mrs. Halden appeared at Sienna's shoulder in under 10 seconds, like she had been waiting for the cue. "Ms. Voss, thank you for your candor. We appreciate exacting standards." Her hand closed lightly over Sienna's forearm, a gesture that looked supportive from across the room and felt like a restraint up close. "Diaz, with me." She guided her 3 steps toward the service arch and dropped her voice. "You are now on table 11. No improvising, no conversational tone. Pour, clear, step back. Understood?" Sienna swallowed around a hot knot of humiliation. "Yes, ma'am." Table 11 does not get errors. Mrs. Halden released her arm and pivoted away without waiting for acknowledgement. The pressure of her fingers stayed behind like a bruise. Table 11 sat near the far wall, outside the densest noise, where people with the most power could watch the room without being watched too obviously in return. Sienna noticed the details first, because details kept her safe. 2 plainclothes men stationed near opposing columns with jackets cut to hide shoulder rigs. 1 waiter rerouted twice before entering their orbit. 1 camera above the mural angled down, but not quite enough to catch the corridor behind the velvet partition. 4 seats were occupied. 3 men spoke in low, decisive exchanges about shipping delays and municipal permits. The 4th said almost nothing. Luca Pellegrini looked younger than rumor and harder than photographs. His suit was black without shine, his tie a darker black, his watch slim and expensive enough to disappear unless you knew what to look for. He did not fidget, did not check his phone, did not tilt toward attention because attention tilted toward him on its own. When Sienna approached with still water and 2 glasses, the men nearest her shifted half an inch. Protective geometry, instinctive and coordinated. "Water," she said quietly. One of the men nodded without looking at her. Luca lifted his gaze as she poured. Dark eyes, assessing, not wandering. She felt the scan land on her hands first, then on her face, then on the room behind her, reflected in the glass. "Thank you," he said. His voice was low baritone, smooth and controlled, carrying no overt threat and no wasted sound. She stepped back exactly as instructed, tray held close, shoulders square. The conversation resumed around permits, a labor dispute in Brooklyn, weather delays at the docks. Sienna cataloged exits while pretending not to. Main salon doors 30 feet left, kitchen swing door 12 feet right. Emergency stair behind velvet partition, private elevator near corridor intersection, where security stood with neutral expressions and active eyes. She completed 2 more rotations to table 11. On the 3rd pass, as she set down a replacement napkin and lifted an empty flute, Luca spoke without raising volume. "Why do you never sit with your back exposed?" The question was so precise, it felt like a blade slid between ribs. Sienna's fingers tightened around the stem in her hand before she forced them loose. "Front desk training," she answered, polished and immediate. "We're taught to monitor entry points." One corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile. "That isn't training, that's habit." The room noise pressed in around them. Silverware, subdued laughter, rain striking tall windows and soft, relentless sheets. She kept her expression neutral, but her throat constricted so sharply she had to choose each breath. "I like to see the room," she said. "It helps me work faster." For a long second, Luca held her gaze like he was weighing the lie for structure and stress points. Then he inclined his head once and returned his attention to the man speaking beside him. Dismissal and permission in one motion. Sienna stepped away on careful legs. By 4:18 a.m., the donor reception had thinned to final toasts and expensive fatigue. Coats were requested, cars called, signatures collected on room transfers for guests too tired to reach their own hotels. Mrs. Halden redirected Sienna to the service dock to assist valet overflow because the storm had slowed pickup cycles and drivers were stacking 3 deep under the awning. Outside, rain hammered the concrete with a force that turned the loading lane into a sheet of moving silver. Exhaust and wet wool and ozone mingled in the air, sharp enough to taste. Sienna pulled her blazer tighter, clipboard tucked under one arm, and checked plate numbers against claim tickets while valets jogged between idling headlights and the side entrance. The weather ate sound and returned it distorted. Tires hissing, doors thudding, radio chatter snapping through static. Station 1 called out a mismatch. Station 2 flagged a delayed key handoff. At Station 3, a young valet stood half-turned from the rain, cigarette pinched between 2 fingers and forgotten, burning down without being drawn. His free hand shook so hard, ash fell in uneven lines onto his sleeve. When Sienna asked for ticket 47, he startled like she had touched him. Sorry, he said, voice thin. "Just cold." "It's 74 degrees in the dock bay," she said before she could soften it. He looked past her toward the stairwell door, then away too fast. "Yeah, right. Just rough night." A skin prickle warning traveled across her shoulders. She followed his glance. The stairwell door near the utility lockers stood ajar by 2 inches, though building code kept it self-closing, and the maintenance team checked those hinges every shift. No one was entering. No one was leaving. Beyond it, darkness pooled where the emergency lights should have cast a steady bar across concrete. Sienna moved toward it because unease had never protected anyone on its own. 2 steps in, she heard footsteps from inside the corridor behind her, then silence when she stopped. She turned. Only rain, 2 drivers arguing over lane order, and the valet at Station 3 pretending to relight the same dead cigarette with trembling hands. She tapped the radio clipped to her waistband. "Dock to security control. Do a visual on utility stairwell by Station 3. Door is not sealed." Static crackled. Then a bored voice answered, "Copy, pending. Unit is tied up in East Lounge spill. Hold position." Pending. She bit back a bitter laugh. Pending was what underpaid systems called risk when they were short-staffed. The door shifted half an inch wider with a slow scrape. No one emerged. The dark gap became a line, then a shape of absence against concrete gray. Sienna felt her pulse in her wrists, in her jaw, in the old place under her collarbone where fear always collected first. She set the clipboard down on a crate and took 1 step closer, eyes tracking hinge, threshold, shadow depth, any movement that could be mapped before it reached her. From inside the stairwell came the faint scent of wet tobacco and cologne she had spent years teaching her body to forget. Then a man's voice, low and familiar in a way that made her blood turn cold, slipped through the gap with deliberate softness. Lucia Ferraro. The name struck her like cold metal against bone. And for one suspended second, Sienna forgot the rain, the ticket clipboard, the line of headlights idling in the dock lane. Lucia Ferraro lived in sealed court records and one locked drawer in her apartment, in old signatures she no longer used. In years she had paid to bury with silence and routine and a careful smile at the front desk. Hearing it spoken out loud in the service dock at 4:21 in the morning made her skin tighten across her shoulders as if her body recognized danger before her mind admitted it. The stairwell door opened another inch. A polished black shoe appeared first, then the long line of a dark coat, damp at the hem. Then Victor Ramirez's face, lifting from shadow with that same public charm that once convinced judges, neighbors, and her own relatives that he was patient, funny, harmless. He looked almost unchanged. Trimmed beard, immaculate collar, a narrow silver watch she remembered buying on installment when she still believed apologies could be trusted. Only his eyes were different. Brighter and flatter at the same time, fixed on her with proprietary calm. "Still scanning exits," he said softly, as if they were meeting by chance after years apart. "You always did like walls at your back." Sienna's fingers found the radio at her waistband and pressed transmit hard enough to hurt. Static answered, then cut. The channel light failed to turn green. Dead zone. She had told engineering twice that dock interference created blind pockets near the utility stair. Both requests were still open. Victor noticed the movement and smiled. "Don't do that. You know I hate scenes." Two valet runners crossed behind her with umbrellas and luggage, close enough to hear if she called, close enough to pretend they had not. She forced her voice steady. "You are not authorized in this area. Leave now." His jaw twitched once, a private tell that never showed in daylight. "There she is. Hotel Diction." He stepped fully into the dock light and spread his hands like a man negotiating a misunderstanding. "I came to talk, Lucia. You vanished. We still have unfinished obligations. My name is Sienna. To payroll, maybe." His gaze dropped to her nameplate, then back to her face. "To me, you are still my wife." The word scraped. She had the divorce order memorized, stamped, signed, filed in 3 jurisdictions. But Victor had always treated documents as suggestions for other people. Rain hammered the awning overhead. A car horn sounded twice from the pickup lane. Somewhere behind her, Station 3 muttered into a handset, then went abruptly quiet. Sienna took one step back toward the bright zone near the loading bay camera, and Victor matched it with one step forward. "Don't run to security," he said, still smiling. "They can't help with marital debts." Her heartbeat thudded in her throat, heavy and uneven. "There are no debts. You testified against your own father. Men lost money. Men kept records." He tilted his head, voice nearly affectionate. "You think a new surname erased that?" The old panic rose like floodwater, fast and disorienting. She saw flashes she had trained herself not to relive. Courthouse hallways with no windows, a clerk sliding forms toward trembling hands, the phone calls at night with breathing and no words. She pushed air into her lungs and reached again for the radio, thumbing a different channel. "Dock to control, urgent. Unidentified male in restricted corridor. I need..." Victor closed the distance and caught her wrist before she finished. His grip was hard, practiced. The same 2-finger pressure over tendon that could force compliance without leaving obvious marks until later. Pain shot up her forearm. The radio dropped and skidded under a parked luggage cart. "Enough," he murmured, face inches from hers now. Cologne and rain and stale tobacco wrapping around her like a remembered trap. "You embarrassed me in court, remember? You left me with bills, with people asking where you went. You don't get to disappear and call that freedom." Sienna twisted, trying to break his grip with the angle Matteo from self-defense training had once demonstrated to staff in a seminar no one took seriously. Victor adjusted instantly and yanked her toward the utility corridor where the camera dome didn't cover the corner by the linen cages. Her shoulder clipped a concrete pillar. Sharp pain bloomed along her collarbone. "Let go. Lower your voice." His smile stayed fixed, while his words changed temperature. "Walk with me, or I drag you and make this ugly for everyone." Two junior banquet staff stood 10 feet away, near a rolling rack of glassware, frozen with panic and indecision. One of them met her eyes, then looked down at the floor. The other mouthed sorry and pretended to secure a crate strap that did not need securing. Humiliation hit almost harder than fear. Not because they failed her, but because she understood why. Victor looked respectable. She looked like staff in a wet blazer at the edge of a restricted dock, arguing with a man who called her by a different name. He tightened his hold and pulled again. The skin at her wrist split where his watch edge bit down. Warmth spread under her cuff. "Think in procedures," she ordered herself. "Not fear. Procedure, location, alarm, witness, record." Her free hand found the fire pull station mounted beside the utility door. She had cataloged it at first glance, red box 16 inches from the corner, covered by a clear flip guard. Victor saw her shift and drove her arm downward, but she was already moving with the last of her leverage. Her elbow slammed into the guard, plastic snapped, and she dragged the handle all the way down. The alarm detonated through the dock in one shrill mechanical howl that turned every head at once. Strobes burst red against wet concrete and chrome bumpers. Drivers shouted. A valet dropped a key ring that clattered across the lane. Victor flinched, not from noise, but from attention, and his grip loosened for a fraction of a second. Sienna tore her wrist free and shoved him backward with both palms. He slipped on rainwater at the threshold, hit the doorframe, and his phone flew from his hand, striking concrete before sliding under the edge of the linen cart. She moved without thinking, ducked, snatched it, and rose into the crowding confusion as staff began to spill from adjacent corridors. Victor recovered, face stripped of charm now. "Give me that." "Security!" she shouted, voice cracking but loud enough to carry above the alarm. "He assaulted me. Restricted access." He reached for her again. She pivoted around the cart, putting metal between them, and back toward the service hall where a wall-mounted admin terminal glowed at hip height, still logged into banquet operations. The phone in her hand was unlocked, notifications stacked on screen. Her own old name flashed in a recent thread. 2 words previewed beneath it. Payment overdue. He saw where she looked and swore under his breath. "Lucia, don't. You have no idea who else is tied to that. I know exactly who is tied to it." She jammed the phone against the terminal scanner to wake the workstation, fingers shaking so violently she mistyped her employee passcode twice before the third attempt opened the internal dashboard. Alarm protocol auto-launched evacuation panels, but the messaging tab was still accessible. She dragged Victor's newest voice notes, screenshots, and a folder image labeled Marital Ledger into an incident report addressed to Compliance, Legal Archive, and Security Chief Matteo Rossi. Subject line: Coercion and assault evidence, live event dock level. She hit send before Victor reached around the cart. The upload bar flashed from 0 to 40 to complete. Timestamp stamped in green. immutable within corporate retention once mirrored to server. He saw it land and went white with rage. "You stupid—" He lunged, catching her sleeve and wrenching her sideways. Fabric tore at the mended seam. She slammed into the terminal edge, breath gone in a hard rush, then kicked the cart brake free with her heel so the loaded rack rolled between them. Glass rattled but held. By then the corridor had filled with sound beyond the alarm. Boots, radios, people shouting routes. The first uniformed security officer rounded the corner, took one look at Victor's grip and Sienna's bleeding wrist, and reached for his earpiece. "Control, code black at dock utility. Need backup now." Victor released her and switched masks again so quickly it was dizzying. He raised both hands, palms out, adopting offended civility. "This is a misunderstanding. She's my ex-wife. She's emotional." Sienna pressed her back to the terminal, chest heaving, and lifted Victor's phone high where everyone could see the thread still open with his threats, dates, and payment demands. "He tracked me under a sealed identity. He forced entry and put hands on me. I filed evidence 3 minutes ago." The officer hesitated, not because he doubted her, but because hierarchy at the Aurora Crescent always arrived in layers. He needed authorization to detain a man dressed like a board member at 4 a.m. unless violence was undeniable. Victor read the hesitation and smiled toward the officer, controlled and courteous. "Call your manager. This can be handled privately." That was when the corridor changed. Not the light, not the alarm, not the rain. Authority moved through the crowd like a pressure wave, and people adjusted before they fully turned, stepping back, opening space. Matteo Rossi came first, broad-shouldered in a dark suit gone damp at the cuffs, earpiece wire taut against his neck. 2 plainclothes guards flanked him with professional stillness. Luca Pellegrini entered behind them, coat unbuttoned, expression carved to neutrality so strict it looked colder than anger. His gaze went to Sienna's wrist, then to Victor, then to the phone in her raised hand. The pause lasted less than a second. "Lock elevators," Luca said, voice low and barely contained. "Seal west exit. Pull dock footage from 415 forward and mirror it off-site. Medic to this corridor now. Police liaison on line 2. Matteo was already issuing the orders into his mic. "You heard him. Move." Victor straightened, trying to reclaim social footing. "Mr. Pellegrini, I'm sure your staff has exaggerated. This is a family matter." Luca took one step closer. Controlled movement, no wasted motion. "You entered a restricted area, laid hands on my employee, and interrupted emergency protocol." His eyes did not leave Victor's face. "Nothing about that is private." Victor gave a short laugh that failed halfway. "Employee? Ask her who she really is." "I did," Luca said. "She answered to the name on her file. The rest is not your permission to define." Sienna felt her knees threaten to fold now the command had arrived, now that someone with unquestioned authority had named the line out loud. Matteo noticed and moved to her side without touching until she nodded. "Stay with me," he said. "Medic is 30 seconds out." Victor shifted his weight, measuring exits. One guard mirrored him instantly, hand near his jacket but not drawing. The second guard recovered the dropped radio from under the cart. They handed it to Matteo. Behind them, the 2 junior banquet staff, who had looked away, stood rigid with guilt, watching as if witnessing a language they wished they had spoken sooner. The medic team arrived with a trauma bag and clean gauze. Sienna let them guide her to the wall bench while still clutching Victor's phone. Luca crouched to her eye level, but kept a deliberate foot of distance, palms visible. "Can you hand that to Matteo?" he asked quietly. She nodded once and transferred the device. fingers reluctant to release because evidence felt like the only solid ground she had. Mateo sealed it immediately in a clear tamper pouch and read the timestamp aloud for the body cam recording now activated on his chest harness. 4:26:41. Device recovered from subject Victor Ramirez at active assault scene. Victor's composure cracked at the edges. You think this protects her? Ferraro money touched too many accounts. You can't lock me out with hotel security. Luca stood, full height now, and the corridor seemed to narrow around him. This is no longer hotel security. He angled his head toward the responding officer who had returned with municipal police on speaker. It is criminal trespass, assault, and coercion with digital evidence submitted prior to detention. The officer swallowed and stepped forward with renewed certainty. Sir, place your hands behind your back. Victor looked from Luca to Sienna, hatred and disbelief warring across his face. You did this. Sienna held his stare despite the tremor running through her body. No, you documented it yourself. By 4:29 a.m., with the alarm silenced and the dock lane rerouted, Victor was restrained pending formal handoff, shouting legal threats that sounded thinner each time the words hit concrete. Luca did not watch him go. He turned instead to Mateo. Full protective protocol for Ms. Diaz. No exceptions. Notify legal counsel and prepare immediate statement preservation. Then to Sienna, voice softer but still precise. You're coming upstairs where the doors lock from the inside. Do you understand me? Her throat hurt when she answered, but the word came clear. Yes. He gave one tight nod and signaled the medic team to move with them toward the private service elevator, red alarm lights still pulsing faintly across wet floors as dawn waited somewhere beyond the storm. The private service elevator doors shut on the dock's wet noise, and the sudden quiet made Sienna hear her own breathing in sharp, uneven pulls. Red alarm light still strobed through the narrow seam for 2 beats before the car climbed, replacing sirens and shouted protocols with the mechanical hum of cables and Mateo's voice relaying orders into his earpiece at machine gun pace. Control. Confirm west exit sealed. I want badge logs from 3:30 through present. Pull Station 3 valet assignment and freeze his access pending interview. Yes, now. Legal gets first copy footage and cloud mirror. If any clip is missing, I want to know who touched the server. The medic knelt in front of Sienna on the elevator's fold-down bench and worked with quick hands, gloved fingers pressing gauze over the split skin at her wrist. Look at me, she said. Name and date of birth. Sienna Marisol Diaz, April 9th. Good. Any allergy to lidocaine? No. The medic nodded, then glanced to Luca. She needs sutures. It's shallow but open. Do it upstairs, Luca said. His voice was low, level, and still carrying that barely contained pressure she had heard in the corridor. No clinic transport, no shared hallways. Mateo shifted his stance, broad shoulder blocking the panel, even though no one else was in the car. Penthouse medical suite is clear. Hall cams confirmed. 2 on the east junction, 1 outside the suite door, 1 at stair access. Luca didn't look away from Sienna. Rotate every 40 minutes. No one approaches without my authorization, and hers. And hers. The words landed strangely in her chest. Not soft, just precise. She pressed her back to the elevator wall and tried to unclench her jaw. Wet fabric clung to her shoulder where rain had soaked through. Her torn sleeve exposed a line of reddening skin from wrist to forearm. Every time the elevator motor changed pitch, her pulse jumped as if Victor had moved again. At 4:37 a.m., the doors opened to a private corridor Sienna had only seen on maintenance maps. Matte stone, muted sconces, thick carpet that swallowed footsteps. Security moved first, scanning corners, checking the sight line to the double doors at the end. Mateo signaled once, and a woman in navy scrubs stepped out from the suite with a rolling tray already prepped, followed by a man in a dark suit carrying a slim briefcase and a legal pad. "Ms. Diaz," the man said, stopping 2 paces away. "Elliot Crane, counsel retained on your behalf for immediate protective filings. I will not ask for details until you are medically stabilized." Sienna blinked at him, still catching up with how fast authority could move when it chose to. "Retained by who?" "By me," Luca said. Elliot added carefully, "My client requested independent review and explicit consent before any civil action is filed. You choose what proceeds." That, too, was control turned into structure. Sienna gave a tight nod and let the nurse guide her into the suite. The room looked less like a hospital than a private apartment designed by someone who distrusted weakness. Clean lines, glass cabinets, concealed monitors, a treatment chair angled toward windows now streaked with rain. A folded set of dry clothes waited on a side table beside sealed water, electrolyte packets, and a tray with crackers she hadn't asked for. Someone had thought through shock before she arrived. "Jacket off if you can," the nurse said gently. Sienna struggled with the torn sleeve. Luca stepped forward, then stopped before touching her. "May I?" She swallowed and nodded once. He slid the blazer from her shoulders with careful, measured movements, never trapping her arm, never forcing the angle that hurt. The nurse cleaned the wound while Sienna stared at the skyline beyond the glass, lights blurred by weather and adrenaline. "3 sutures," the nurse murmured. "You're going to feel pressure." Sienna hissed as the needle bit. Mateo stood near the door, speaking quietly into his mic. "Police liaison confirmed. Detective unit en route for statement collection on site. ETA 22 minutes. Patrol logged suspect transfer request pending district intake. Device chain of custody recorded." Luca's response was immediate. "No questioning until counsel clears timing. She gives one statement, recorded with breaks." Elliot looked up from his pad. "Agreed. Also, the incident report she sent to compliance is time-stamped and archived. I want duplicate export and hash verification before sunrise." Mateo answered, "Already requested." Sienna's eyes closed for a second as relief and exhaustion collided. She had hit send. It held. The record existed outside Victor's reach. The nurse taped the final dressing and checked her pupils with a penlight. "Any dizziness now?" "Less." "Pain scale?" 6. The nurse handed her 2 tablets and water. "Take these. No sedatives until legal interview is complete, unless you ask." Across the room, Luca was issuing another chain of commands without raising his voice. "Get her apartment building on silent watch before shift change. Coordinate with clinic transport provider under a privacy flag. No names on open channels. Use case number only." Sienna's head snapped toward him. "Clinic?" He turned. "Your phone lock screen showed 3 missed calls from nephrology billing at 2:27. I assumed they were connected to someone you protect." Shame flashed hot under her skin before she could stop it. "You checked my phone?" "Only visible notifications while Mateo bagged evidence." No apology in his tone, but no evasion either. "If that line is exposed through Victor, we close it now." The nurse, reading the shift in Sienna's breathing, stepped between tension and procedure with practical calm. "Ms. Diaz, your blood pressure is climbing again. Sit back." Sienna obeyed because her body was no longer negotiating. Her hands shook hard enough to rattle the cup. Luca watched once, then looked to the nurse. "What lowers that response?" "Predictability," the nurse said. Information before movement. No surprises. He nodded as if she had delivered tactical intelligence. Understood. By 4:58 a.m., the suite had become a controlled command post. Matteo pinned a printed floor plan on a magnetic board and marked access points with dry erase circles. Elliot prepared emergency filings, temporary protective order request, identity protection extension, non-disclosure directives for hotel staff with direct knowledge. A housekeeper entered briefly with a small sealed bag and left without speaking. Inside were Sienna's tote, her phone, and the 3 envelopes from her desk drawer, now slightly bent at the corners. She froze when she saw them. Rent past due. Utility warning. Dialysis invoice. Luca noticed the way her fingers hovered instead of reached. Do you want those put away? No. Her voice came out rough. I need to see them. She pulled the dialysis invoice free and flattened it on her knee, reading numbers she already knew. Final reminder sat in bold block text across the top like a verdict. Her throat closed. Elliot's pen stopped. Is there a dependent in active treatment? My brother, she said, eyes still on the page. Nico, 19. Saturday overflow slot. If payment doesn't post by 5 p.m., they delay transport authorization. She looked up then, meeting Luca's gaze because pretending had become expensive in this room. That's what he meant by debts. He never stopped trying to route pressure through money. Luca held her stare, expression unreadable for a beat. Then he turned to Matteo. Call the clinic's administrative supervisor from legal line, not security. Verify balance and pay it through documented trust disbursement tagged as emergency employee protection expense. Not cash, not personal transfer. Paper trail. Sienna stiffened. I didn't ask for... I know. His tone stayed controlled. This is not charity. This is risk containment and continuity of care for a targeted witness. You can contest the mechanism later. Tonight, he does not get to weaponize medical billing. The argument she had ready dissolved under the logic of it. She hated how quickly tears burned behind her eyes anyway. She looked away toward the rain-striped glass until the sting passed. A soft knock came at the outer door, followed by Matteo's verification exchange and the entry of 2 detectives in plain clothes, badges visible, recorder kit in hand. Elliot stepped forward first. Interview parameters are simple. Recorded statement, counsel present, medical interruptions honored. One detective nodded. Understood. The other opened a notebook. Ms. Diaz, before we begin, we need confirmation on the suspect device. Already logged, Matteo said, placing a copy of the chain of custody sheet on the table. Recovered at 4:26:41, sealed immediately, no access post seal. The detective scanned it and grunted approval. Good. Sienna sat straighter in the treatment chair, hands wrapped around the water cup to steady them. When she spoke, she kept to facts the way she had trained herself for years. Location, timestamp, exact words, force used, witnesses present, alarm activation, digital submission path. She did not round edges to sound polite. She did not minimize to make strangers comfortable. Each sentence felt like setting down a weight she had carried alone. When she reached the line about Victor using her old name, the younger detective looked up. Lucia Ferraro? Elliot cut in before Sienna had to defend herself. Protected identity status is active. You will reference her current legal name in all visible records. Right, the detective said quickly. Noted. The interview ran 26 minutes, with 2 pauses for vitals. At 5:31 a.m., both detectives signed the preliminary statement receipt and confirmed Victor's booking track had moved from holding to central intake review on assault and intimidation flags. They left with formal thanks, quiet shoes, and one clear assurance: no release hearing before afternoon docket. When the door shut behind them, silence settled heavy for the first time since the dock. Sienna's body started shaking only then, delayed shock unwinding in waves. The nurse draped a warm blanket over her shoulders. Matteo stepped back to give space. Elliot gathered his files and asked, "Do you consent to filing the emergency order now, including workplace and residence exclusion zones?" "Yes," Sienna said. "Say it for record." "I consent," he nodded. "Done." The room thinned as tasks dispersed. Nurse to pharmacy cabinet, Matteo to corridor, Elliot to secure printer. Luca remained near the windows, hands braced on the back of a chair, looking out at the city turning gray with dawn. Sienna watched him from the edge of the blanket, uncertain what came after adrenaline when no one was shouting anymore. 3 days earlier, she would have called this room unreachable, the kind of protected altitude reserved for people with inherited certainty. Now she sat in it with stitched skin, a legal file bearing 2 names, and a brother whose treatment might continue because one man in a dark suit had treated logistics like a shield. Her phone buzzed in the sealed bag, persistent against plastic. The nurse handed it over after checking with Matteo through the doorway. Nico's name filled the screen. Sienna answered on speaker because her hand was still unsteady. "Hey." His voice came thin with sleep and worry. "I saw 3 missed calls from you and then nothing. Are you okay?" She opened her mouth and found no easy lie left. "I'm safe right now." Right now is not an answer. Across from her, Luca looked away from the window and waited without interrupting. No pressure, no prompt, just attention held steady. Sienna drew a slow breath. "There was an incident at work. I gave a statement. You're going to get a call from a clinic supervisor this morning, and your Saturday transport is covered." Nico went quiet for a beat. "How?" "Because I finally stopped handling this alone." The words changed the room more than any command had. Nico exhaled, shaky but relieved. "Okay. Then I'm with you. Whatever this is, I'm with you." After the call ended, Sienna kept the phone in both hands and stared at the dark screen. Luca crossed the room only when she looked up. He stopped at that same careful distance and spoke in the same controlled cadence he had used in the elevator. "Your brother is now under the same protection perimeter as you," he said. "Address scrub, transport verification codes, restricted disclosure list. You will review and approve each measure before implementation. Nothing moves over your head." Something in her chest eased at the structure of it, at the permission embedded in the terms. She nodded, then glanced toward the invoice still on her lap. "My father used to say debt was the cleanest leash," she said quietly. "He taught men like Victor how to pull it. I changed my name to cut that line, but numbers kept finding me anyway." Luca's expression shifted, not softer exactly, but less armored. "Debt is only a leash when no one documents who holds it," he said. "You documented him tonight." Sienna looked at the dressing on her wrist, at the neat white tape where torn skin had been closed under bright lights and witness signatures. The rain had slowed to a fine mist against the glass. Somewhere below, the hotel would be resetting table linens, recalibrating calm, pretending dawn erased what midnight revealed. Up here, the record remained. For the first time since she heard Lucia Ferraro in that stairwell, she believed the line had moved in her favor, and she did not have to move it back alone. The certainty lasted only a few breaths before another, older instinct rose against it. Safety arranged this quickly still felt like a room she could be asked to leave at any moment. And that contradiction sat in Sienna's chest like a second heartbeat while the skyline paled beyond the rain. Luca remained where he was, one hand on the chair back, dark suit jacket now folded across an armrest, white cuff marked by a faint smear from the dock. In the suite's controlled light, he looked less like a roomer and more like a man built around restraint, and that made her more uneasy, not less. She had spent years surviving men who mistook possession for care. The shape of protection could look similar from the outside. "I need to say this before anyone else comes in," she said, voice still rough from adrenaline. "If I stay in this perimeter, I need terms." His attention sharpened. Then we set terms. Not spoken and forgotten. Written. I approve access lists. I approve who gets my file. No one searches my apartment without me there unless there is an active threat and a warrant exception. She held his gaze, forcing each point past the tightness in her throat. And no decisions about Nico through back channels, even if you can make them happen faster. Luca nodded once, immediate and without offense. Done. Elliot will draft it as a control protocol and attach it to your protective order package. She hadn't expected agreement to come so cleanly, and the relief that followed irritated her, because relief was how trust began, and trust had cost her before. "You're agreeing too fast." "I'm agreeing because you're right." He crossed the room only after lifting a hand in silent question. She gave a small nod. He took the dialysis invoice from her lap, flattened the bent corner, and set it on the side table so it would not crumple under her shaking fingers. Control without consent is coercion with better tailoring. I have no use for it. The line landed with unsettling precision. She watched his hands while he moved, cataloging exactly what he touched and what he left untouched, and became aware of the other collisions she had been refusing to name. The involuntary pull of wanting to lean toward someone who made chaos orderly, set against the fear of becoming dependent on that order. Her pulse climbed anyway, when he came close enough to hand her a fresh bottle of water. "Tell me if I'm crowding you," he said. "You're not." She hated how quickly the answer came. A faint, tired smile touched his mouth and disappeared. "That sounded like it surprised you." It did. At 5:47 a.m., Matteo returned with 2 printed forms, a tablet, and the clipped urgency of a man balancing 6 risks at once. Clinic supervisor confirmed payment receipt and transport authorization reinstated for Saturday, case number only. No reference to employer, no exposed names. They used the phrase administrative correction. Sienna let out a breath that felt scraped raw on the way up. "Thank you." Matteo inclined his head. "You did the hard part, Ms. Diaz." Elliot stepped in behind him, already writing. "We need your initials on 3 pages. First, emergency protective filing consent, already recorded verbally. Second, sealed identity reinforcement request tied to witness intimidation. Third, disclosure boundaries for private security communication." Sienna took the pen with her left hand because the right still ached beneath the dressing. Luca moved to stand beside, not behind, and she caught a trace of cedar and rain from his shirt as she signed. A dangerous calm settled over her as ink met paper, fear braided with a steadier current she could not dismiss. She was not invisible in this room. She was being asked, not managed. That distinction was thin and enormous. When Elliot collected the forms, she looked at Luca again. "There's another condition. Name it. If Victor reaches out, I choose whether to answer. Not you, not legal, me." Matteo made a quiet sound, objection ready, but Luca lifted 2 fingers and he stopped. "You'll choose. Luca said. With one framework: no contact off record. If he calls, it is on speaker, logged, and witnessed. Sienna nodded. Agreed. The nurse returned to check her bandage, and Luca stepped back to give room. Sienna watched him do it and felt that same disorienting shift in her body. Fear and attraction coexisting without canceling each other. She did not romanticize danger. She recognized the structure around it, the discipline, the refusal to take what had not been offered. Her skin still prickled at sudden sounds. Yet when hallway footsteps passed outside the suite door, her eyes went first to him and found steadiness there. By 6:10 a.m., the storm had thinned to mist, and the city below was waking in gradients of gray. Delivery trucks edging through wet streets, ferries leaving white trails across the river. In the suite, the quiet broke when Sienna's phone lit with an unlisted number and a corrections facility identifier in small text beneath it. Matteo saw it and was at her side in 2 strides. Do not answer. Sienna stared at the screen until the ring almost timed out, then looked at Luca. This is what he does. He pushes through every barrier until someone else decides for me. She tapped the recorder app with her thumb, set the phone on the side table, and met Matteo's eyes. Witnessed, logged, speaker on. Luca's expression shifted into hard focus. Proceed, she answered. This is Sienna Diaz. This call is being recorded. Victor's laugh came through thin prison acoustics, familiar and poisonous. Still performing. They gave you one clean room and suddenly you think you're untouchable. Her hand trembled once. She pressed it flat to her knee. State your name for the recording. A pause. Then silk over steel. Victor Ramirez, your husband. Incorrect. Ex-husband. Final order filed and served. She kept her voice level, each word chosen for court, not catharsis. You are instructed to cease contact. You don't instruct me? The charm cracked, then reassembled. Listen carefully, Lucia. You carry my name in documents no one erased. You testify again, I pull every ledger your father ever touched and hang it around your brother's neck. You know I can. Sienna's throat constricted, but she did not look away from the recording timer climbing on screen. Threat against a protected witness and dependent. Noted. You were always dramatic. No, I was quiet. That ended at 4:26 this morning. The line went silent for a beat, and when he spoke again, the mask was gone. You think Pellegrini keeps you because he cares? Men like him collect leverage. Your leverage. Luca moved then, one step into her line of sight, asking without words. She gave a tight nod. His voice entered the call low and controlled, each syllable sharpened by intent. This is Luca Pellegrini. This line is monitored by counsel and security. Your statements are preserved for prosecution. Victor scoffed. There he is, the owner. No, Luca said. The witness is designated protection contact under legal order. There is a difference, and you will learn it. Protection contact, Victor repeated, derisive. You can phrase it however you like. She belongs where I say. Sienna felt something cold and clean settle through her fear. She leaned toward the phone before Luca could answer again. I belong to myself. Put that in your memory with the intake number on your wristband. The silence after that was thicker than shouting. Matteo's jaw tightened. Elliot, who had returned at the first ring and now stood near the door with legal pad ready, wrote without looking up. Victor's next words came clipped and brittle. You'll regret this. Elliot spoke for the first time, crisp and formal. Mr. Ramirez, this is attorney Elliot Crane. You are now on notice that any further direct contact constitutes additional witness intimidation. Terminate the call. Victor exhaled hard, the sound blunted by the facility line. This isn't over. It is for this call, Sienna said, and ended it. The room stayed still for 2 beats while the recording saved. Then she forwarded the file to Elliot, to Mateo, and to the detective address already in her sent folder. She watched the upload confirmation appear in green and felt a narrow, decisive satisfaction replace the tremor in her hands. Mateo checked his watch. I'll have Central Dispatch attach this before arraignment review. Elliot held up his phone. Already transmitted. I want certified transcript request filed within the hour. Luca's gaze stayed on Sienna, not the logistics. You did exactly what you needed to do. She swallowed. I wanted to throw the phone. You didn't. Mateo stepped into the corridor to relay updates. Elliot followed, speaking quietly about supplemental counts. The nurse took the chance to swap Sienna's bandage and dim one bank of lights. When the door shut again, only Sienna and Luca remained by the windows, city noise distant beneath reinforced glass. She looked at him for a long moment. When he says ownership language, part of me still freezes. Not because I believe him, because my body remembers what came after those words. Luca's voice lowered further. Then we build responses your body can trust. Predictable routes, known faces, advance notice, no surprises. He paused, then added with deliberate clarity, and one standing rule. No one, including me, speaks for you when you are able to speak for yourself. The statement hit harder than any vow she had heard in years. She felt tears threaten again, angry and relieved at once. You keep saying the right thing. I say what I can enforce. She laughed once, short and frayed, and wiped at her cheek with the heel of her hand. That should not be attractive. His eyes held hers, dark and steady. Emotion kept behind discipline, but not absent. Attraction is not a contract. Fear is not consent. We can hold both truths and still make clean decisions. A knock sounded at the outer door. 3 measured taps. Mateo's voice followed. Update from Central. Charges are expanding with the new call. Detective wants 10 minutes for a supplemental statement, then no further interruptions. Sienna straightened in the chair, exhaustion dragging at her bones, but no longer deciding for her. Send him in. Luca glanced toward the door, then back to her. Do you want me in the room? She considered the question, the old reflex to endure privately, the new structure she was learning to use without surrendering herself. Yes, at my left side. Not answering for me. He inclined his head. Understood. When the detective entered with recorder in hand, Sienna did not shrink from the red light on the device this time. She gave the timeline, repeated Victor's words exactly, and added one final line for the record, voice steady despite the ache in her wrist and the fatigue behind her eyes. I am requesting full no-contact enforcement, continued identity protection, and prosecution on all available counts. Any claim of ownership is a threat, documented as such. The detective nodded, serious now in a way that left no room for dismissal. Documented. Outside, morning finally broke through the last of the rain, turning the glass pale gold. Inside the suite, with signatures drying and files transmitting across secure channels, Sienna felt the moral line hold where she had drawn it. And this time, it did not move when someone stronger stepped near. The detective clicked off the recorder, capped his pen, and read the supplemental statement number aloud while Elliot checked each digit against the case file. Sienna watched the red light disappear and felt the room tilt back toward ordinary gravity, Not safe exactly, but measurable. Mateo stepped in as the detective left, closing the suite door with a controlled, quiet pull. "Two updates," he said. "First, your call recording is now attached to the morning docket packet. Second, digital forensics opened the device." He set a printed chain of custody addendum on the table in front of her. Clear bag number, extraction time, hash verification. The same phone Victor had dropped in the dock now existed as evidence in 3 systems that could not be quietly edited by a night manager or deleted by a frightened staffer. Elliot scanned it and nodded. "Good. Compliance export?" Mateo handed over a second page. "Incident email submitted at 4:26 is mirrored to corporate legal archive and municipal subpoena server. We also preserve dock camera feeds from 4:15 to 4:34, plus corridor cams and elevator logs. No gaps." Sienna let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "And the stairwell?" Maintenance verified the self-close arm was wedged with a folded valet ticket and tape. Mateo's mouth hardened. "Not a malfunction. Deliberate. We recovered both." That strange darkness behind the stairwell door, the missing emergency glow, the slow scrape of it widening on its own. All of it snapped into place. Procedure, not paranoia. Luca stayed at her left side, silent while Mateo continued. Station 3 valet gave a full statement. Victor approached him before shift, offered cash, then threatened to expose his undocumented cousin's address if he reported contact. He admitted he kept watch and looked away when you moved toward the door. Sienna closed her eyes for one beat. She remembered the trembling cigarette, the ash falling on his sleeve, the look past her shoulder. Not random, not nerves from weather. "And the 2 banquet juniors?" she asked. "They're waiting outside to speak, if you want it," Mateo said. "They gave statements. They said they froze. They know that is not a defense." Sienna looked to Luca. He didn't advise, didn't steer, only waited. Her voice came out steady. "Send them in." The 2 staff members entered with shoulders drawn tight, uniforms still wrinkled from the overnight panic. One of them, a young man with a wine stain mark at his cuff, spoke first. "Ms. Diaz, I'm sorry. I saw him grab you. I should have moved." The other, a woman with her hair coming loose from a service knot, swallowed hard. "I looked down because I thought if I didn't engage, he'd leave faster. I filed what I saw. I should have helped you." Sienna studied them, the shame in their faces, the fear that looked too familiar. "I needed one person to call it what it was in that moment," she said. "You didn't. You can't change that now. But you can do one thing next time. Don't wait for rank. Pull the alarm. Speak." Both nodded quickly. Mateo dismissed them and made a note before they'd fully cleared the door. "At your request," he said, "we're submitting a blind spot correction order and radio dead zone repair as part of post-incident audit. New patrol pattern, too." That thread closed as cleanly as thread could. The place that had failed her in small, predictable ways now had a record of those failures, signed and time-stamped. By 2:15 that afternoon, Sienna sat in a holding room off Criminal Court with a paper cup of water gone warm in her hand and the same dull ache in her wrist, now wrapped in fresh white gauze. Nico sat beside her in a borrowed jacket, leg bouncing, eyes moving between the door and her face every few seconds. He had arrived under escort at noon, pale from treatment fatigue and stubborn enough to pretend he wasn't. "You didn't tell me he called from intake," Nico said quietly. "You were sleeping. You still didn't tell me." She took his hand with her uninjured one. I'm telling you now. It's documented. It's in the charges. Luca stood near the far wall with Matteo and Elliot. Dark suit immaculate again, authority contained to posture and timing. He had introduced himself to Nico with formal restraint, no performance, no familiarity he hadn't earned. Nico had stared at him like he was evaluating machinery he might someday trust if it kept working under pressure. A clerk opened the door. "Miss Diaz. Counsel. They're ready." Inside the courtroom, the air felt overconditioned and sharp with old paper. Victor stood in county khaki at defense table, his expression polished for the judge and raw around the edges when he looked at Sienna. The hearing moved fast and procedural until the prosecutor played 32 seconds of the recorded intake call. "You carry my name in documents no one erased. You testify again. I pull every ledger your father ever touched and hang it around your brother's neck." The defense objected. The judge overruled. The clerk, a middle-aged woman with silver glasses and steady hands, kept marking exhibits without flinching. When Victor turned and muttered that she was ruining families for a paycheck, bailiff correction landed instantly. Then he made the mistake that ended his leverage. He leaned toward that same clerk as she passed and said, soft but audible in the courtroom hush, "Careful where you park tonight." The judge's face changed. "Mr. Ramirez, that is a direct threat to court personnel on record. Bail is denied." Victor's head snapped toward Sienna, fury stripping away charm. "You think this protects you?" Before she could answer, Luca stepped one pace forward, stopping exactly where the rail required. His voice remained calm, almost quiet. "She is under legal protection you violated in a court whose staff you just threatened. The line is no longer yours to draw." The judge struck the bench once. "Take him." Victor was removed in restraints, still talking, words swallowed by the closing side door. In the corridor afterward, Elliot turned to Sienna with a different document set. Emergency protective order granted. Identity protection extended. No contact terms broadened to include third-party messaging, digital proxies, and location inferences. Sign here for acknowledgement. She signed. Nico signed as dependent beneficiary where indicated. Luca did not touch the papers until she handed him one copy herself. "Now the housing piece," Elliot said. "Trust channel is approved under witness support framework. Lease is in your names, not in Mr. Pellegrini's." Nico blinked. "We can actually move," Matteo answered. "Today, if you want." They did. The apartment sat on a high floor in a quiet building 3 neighborhoods north, with keycard access, a staffed desk that knew only case numbers, and a kitchen window that caught late sun across the river. It wasn't ornate. It was clean, secure, and warm. A courier delivered 2 duffels from their old place. Then a second run with dialysis supplies and Nico's prescription cooler under chain receipt. Every item was checked against a list before crossing the threshold. Sienna stood in the center of the living room while Matteo reviewed final logistics. "Your old apartment lock is changed. Utilities terminated. Mail hold active under confidential forwarding. The 3 paper notices recovered from your tote are scanned to legal file, and original copies are in this envelope if you want them." She took the envelope and placed it in a kitchen drawer. Not hidden, not displayed. Accounted for. Also, Matteo added, the gossip account that posted your former name received a cease and desist and platform compliance takedown. Archive preserved for prosecution. No reposts in 12 hours. Another thread closed. Nico wandered to the second bedroom and came back grinning despite everything. There's an actual desk and a door that closes all the way. Sienna laughed, brief and real. The sound startled her. 6 weeks later, in a courtroom brighter than the first one. She delivered her sentencing testimony without reading from notes. She spoke to coercion, assault, stalking behavior, intimidation attempts, and financial pressure tactics with dates, records, and corroboration. Victor listened with a fixed smile that never reached his eyes. When she finished, she did not look down. The sentence was read in clear terms: multi-year incarceration on coercion, assault, and witness intimidation, plus enforced no-contact conditions and supervised communication ban. The gavel came down once. It was done. Outside, on the courthouse steps under a clear afternoon sky, Sienna felt the absence of immediate threat like a missing weight rather than a miracle. Nico wrapped an arm around her shoulders and squeezed. "We're really out?" "We're out of him," she said. "The rest we build?" That evening, Luca met them at a quiet restaurant 2 blocks from the river. No private room, no theatrical security display. Only one discreet guard at a distance and the ordinary clink of glassware around them. The hostess began to lead Sienna to a chair facing the wall. Sienna stopped her gently. "I'll take that one," she said, indicating the seat with a clear line to the entrance. Luca watched her choose it, then took the opposite chair without comment. When menus arrived and were set down, his hand rested near hers on the table, not touching until she turned her palm upward and closed the distance herself. "I need one promise," she said. "Name it. If danger moves, you tell me first. Not after, not filtered. I promise." His gaze held hers, steady and unadorned. "And you?" She looked past him to the door, to strangers entering in wet coats, to nothing and no one she recognized as a threat, and then back to him. "I won't disappear when I'm scared." Nico, already halfway through the bread basket, pointed between them with mock severity that barely masked relief. "Good. Keep doing whatever this is, but keep it honest." Luca inclined his head toward him. Agreed. By the time dessert plates were cleared, Sienna's shoulders had lowered from the defensive angle they had held for years. The door remained in her sight line. Her pulse remained even. She still tracked exits out of habit, still noticed hands, corners, mirrors. But the scanning no longer felt like drowning in advance. When they stepped back into the night, Luca offered his arm. She took it by choice, not urgency, and walked beside him toward the waiting car, while Nico argued with Matteo about which moving box had swallowed the coffee maker. The city carried on around them, indifferent and bright. And for the first time in a long time, Sienna did not mistake vigilance for captivity. She sat facing the door because she wanted to, and that was the difference that held